Good afternoon, Brennan.
Hello.
And also Johnny Murphy as well, former Leicester and Munster back, who joins us in studio as well. As you might imagine, the rugby features heavily on the back pages and indeed the front pages today. To take you through the headlines, in the Mail on Sunday, Pain Sailing is the headline they go for. Injuries spoil the party for Ireland as they breeze past below par at Zurich visitors. And then we see, of course, Robbie Henshaw with his arm in a sling. And then I Was Abused. Kieran Dyer reveals his heartbreaking secret after 28 years. That's an interview with Ollie Holt, which we'll get to a little bit later on. In the Sunday World, Sling when you're winning. Double injury blow despite win, and that pick again of Henshaw in a sling. And more woes for Coleman. The Irish skipper picked up a thigh injury in Everton's win over Palace yesterday. In Star Sunday, Forest Thump. Bren hails hat-trick hero James as brave Thistle spiked. That's Celtic's 3-2 victory over Partick yesterday. While on the top of their back page, Schmidt's boys make light work of the Italian job, but the price of victory is a tad unfair. See what they've done there. Picture Ty Furlong limping out of the game. Sun Sport top four. Pep hails Aguero, a legend, after a wonder haul. City's 5-1 win over Leicester last night contained 4 goals for Sergio Aguero. While they've gone with top flaw, Arsene Wenger won't use Europa League to chase the Champions League. On the Sunday Times, victory, but at what price? Injuries to Henshaw and Furlong mar thrashing of Italy. On the Sunday Mirror's back page, perfect one. Jose Mourinho believes that he's the best behaved manager in the Premier League and that he should be given a trophy to prove it. He also claims that he was serious while making that claim. Foursome Aguero, Sergio's 4 past Leicester, makes the big picture on the back of the Sunday Mirror there. And they've gone with Slayer and Stayer on a Spurs tip on the Sunday People's back page. Slayer's Harry Kane, who stuns Gunners and bags Spurs' top 4 slot. And the Stayer's Pochettino, who looks a Remainer, as they say, after planning summits. And on the Sunday Independent sports page, Ireland deliver in style, pick of a smiling Jacob Stockdale crossing for Ireland's 8th try. And they also go with below par dubs have too much quality for Donegal, a 20-15 win, as we mentioned, for Dublin over Donegal last night, and a pick of the man of the match, Colin Baskell, who contributed 4 points of Dublin's total in all. But it's on the other side of the Liffey that we'll head to first of all for that 56-19 win for Ireland over Italy yesterday. There will be plenty of positives, of course, to be taken from this one, but the two things that are going to stick out like sore thumbs on either hand for Joe Schmidt as he reviews the video of this one tomorrow, Johnny, will be conceding 3 tries to a fairly underwhelming Italian side and conceding fairly bad and awful looking injuries in Robbie Henshaw's case and worrying ones in the case of Ty Furlong and Jack Conor.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most kind of worrying thing to come out of it. I think the defensive lapses, I suppose, are down to concentration, which he won't like. Now, Italy did offer some threat and attack at times, but look, they're trying to develop you thought that they were going to take one step forward again from last week, and then you're just kind of going, oh, it doesn't seem to be. So it's going to be kind of a long process for Conor O'Shea. But I think the most important thing going into the Welsh game, which is going to be, you know, a real tough test to try and set up what we all want, the 17th of March, I think is Robbie Henshaw and Tadhg Furlong. I think that's going to be, Robbie certainly looks like he's in a proper spot of bother. You know, it looked pretty bad. Tadhg is worrying because I think on form at the moment he's certainly one of the best tight heads, if not the best tight head all round in the world. So losing to someone like him is pretty big to the squad. But yeah, look, job done. You move on and you try and build in to see what your options are at 13 and a tight head for 2 weeks' time.
Brendan, how much can you glean from a performance like that yesterday in terms of the winning of it?
Nothing. That's the thing, and it's touched on the papers today, and I've already written a little bit about it for the Examiner tomorrow. I crunched a few numbers. I got quite bored yesterday. I was like being in biology class, and
you had 60 odd minutes to do something else.
I did, and you know what? It was literally at about 20 minutes. I started whenever there was a break in play. I was googling and checking, and Ireland under Schmidt have scored, by my reckoning, 61 tries in the Six Nations, and 57% of them are against Italy. No team has put as much hurt on Italy as Ireland have in the Six Nations, and we've seen it before. It bears no relation to what's coming next. I mean, yesterday was all about great day for Jordan Larmour, you know, your first time to wear a senior Irish jersey. I think there was 5 or 6 lads made a Six Nations bow. That's all good stuff. But in the wider scheme of things, it tells us absolutely nothing. And that's why we have the likes of Eamon Sweeney writing today. It's one that could be like pre-cooked. It's like a microwavable piece, and in a lot of ways, because we've all written it, and it's about what are they doing in the Six Nations, how long can this go on.
Yeah, we'll start with that one. Italy are wasting their time and ours is the headline in Sweeney's piece, page 4 of the Sunday Independent Sports section. There's a couple of really telling lines in this one from Eamon. Says last year's great boosterish cliche about the Italians was that Conor O'Shea has them on the right track. There was not an iota of evidence to support this assertion, but O'Shea is Irish and seems a nice guy, so pundits felt duty bound to trot it out. This year's saying du jour is the somewhat less optimistic, it's a long-term project. No SH1T Sherlock, says Sweeney there. However, I could see a scenario whereby Italy could become contenders for a Six Nations. It involves global warming causing a rise in ocean levels that buries the islands of Ireland and Britain beneath the waves forever.
I think he's being overly harsh there. I think you look at their performance last week for 60 minutes against England, and they performed quite well, and they've really improved at tackling. You look at their under-20s on Friday night, you look at the ball, that the rugby that they played with ball in hand, there is a clear progression there. But I think, your stats are telling, they don't like playing Ireland because Joe is he's so ruthless in the fact that, and he's so demanding of his players that there's no switch off. So his power plays against an average Italian side are just going to cause mayhem for 80 minutes. And that's just the reality. They don't have enough natural rugby players in their squad to be put in a defensive situation where, okay, I have to mark 2 guys, okay, hold on him, and then push on to another. They just don't have that natural game sense. And I think you saw him being interviewed yesterday. I think one of the most important people in the development of Italian rugby is probably Steve Aboud.
Yeah.
He was interviewed before the game on TV3 yesterday, which is a really canny interview actually. Yeah. And he kind of told a tale of the scale of what's in front of them, and what they have to try and to build a. Well, Bernard Jackman was in here and he talked about building a culture at Dragons and talked about building a support and trying to gain a momentum off the pitch behind the team. And with Italy, it seems a case of that as well. There needs to be a hell of a lot more other things that are a little bit more nebulous than just getting players to play well on the pitch, that you need them to all collate as one, and hopefully you get lucky and it coincides with a decent team. But it's a difficult thing to have all these balls in the air at one time,
and that's kind of that's the delegation job of Conor O'Shea. And I suppose for him to handpick someone like Steve Aboud to do that, who worked tirelessly in terms of player development but also coaching development in Ireland, and he was one of the head guys at that, all coaching levels. He was down coaching coaches how to coach properly and to learn the game, and I think that's going to be a massive part of where Italy need to improve on. But you look at the 20s, and I think they're probably the biggest side that you look at in terms of where they're going, and look at how they played on Friday night. Okay, there's a mixture of, Noel's team probably switched off in terms of the last 15 minutes, but fair play to Italy. They stuck at it with 14 men and got back into, if they held the ball for a few more phases, they might have had a pop of winning the game.
But have we been saying fair play to Italy for these minor victories for too long? Because you think about it, last night or last afternoon, they were 42-0 down, and we changed our 3 quarters before they got any points on the board. We'd taken Rory Best off by the time they got their 2 of those 3 tries as well. On top of that, we scored 8 tries yesterday. Was it 9 the year before and 8 the year before again? It's hard to mark this progress in terms of anything tangible.
I don't think, to be honest, I don't think you can look at Conor's backroom staff and the guys that he has put in place, like Steve, and then tarnish them with the same brush. I think previously Italians were, go out, get a really good coach who has experience and give him the job, and he just coaches.
He's operating in isolation.
He's operating in isolation. Where Conor's is a root and branch review of the whole structure and the federation, and I think he wants to get the Irish model to Italy, which means that Sergio, everyone, all those guys, you come home and you play for our 2 teams. That's where he has to get to, but that there's money, everything involved.
I think they do have to stick with him. I think Sweeney's point, there's a touch of truth to it. I mean, Conor O'Shea is a very impressive guy. He's a good interviewee. He is Irish. There is a desire to see him do well from a human point of view, and we'll touch on this in media relations maybe later on. That helps a guy. But this is a guy who did superb stuff in the English Institute of Sport. He turned around the culture at Harlequins. This is a guy who, like you said, Johnny, he's not just there to coach a team.
Yeah.
He's helping both Pro 14 franchises on a weekly basis, so is Steve Aboud. So it goes much deeper than what to do. And I remember the Rugby World Cup in 2015 interviewing the Italians. And even back then they were saying we need root and branch change. And at that time they were saying our traditional forward base is diluting, and now we've got all these good backs, and we're still saying that. They don't have the numbers to accelerate that like we would do in Ireland, so it will take time.
Is that going to be helped by being beaten week in and week out in the Six Nations though?
No.
Like
what choice is there?
Like I'm trying to. It's a difficult one to try and figure out, because you want to see everybody. Like nobody wants to see this side get beaten, and it's not a Conor O'Shea issue. It's a World Rugby thing. No one wants to see a side getting roundly beaten week in and week out. It's not fair on them. It does them no favours. Similarly, it does their club game no favours. But then you have the knock-on effect of people are going to be less and less inclined to go through the turnstiles and turn up at a Benetton game or turn up at a Zebre game, and then you have the knock-on effect of, well, if you've not got the money going into the club game, you're not developing the players at the club level who aren't going to move on to the international level, and you're in this vicious cycle. So surely you kind of have to incentivise things a little bit.
Have improved slightly this year, I think, and they are a bit more competitive, certainly out there. But I do think that, you know, the time given to these guys, it's a cycle, and probably a cycle and a half. So that's 6 years. You know, you look at World Cups, he needs 6 years for there to be any real development in terms of where he needs to get to. But then also, the only way to stop days like yesterday or Italy getting the wooden spoon the majority of the time is to have a relegation and promotion in terms of the underneath European Championship with Georgia and the likes. But then you're going to have the same issue that if Georgia do end up beating Italy to get promoted, then they're going to be in the exact same boat. But then you are improving Georgia to a certain extent. So it's something that probably does need to be looked at. But we're in the middle of that cycle. It's certainly not going to be looked at, I don't think, in Conor O'Shea's time.
No.
Would you be disappointed to see a biannual trip to Rome go by the wayside?
I've never done the trip to Rome, so I've nothing to miss out on. I've been,
so you're definitely in favour of promotion relegation just because of you've never been to Rome before?
Look, I mean, the bit of change would be fine, but this isn't an argument that's limited to rugby. I mean, we have this argument in GA circles the whole time. You know, it's the same thing, the Laois, the Antrims, the Offaly's, the Carlos and hurling and everything else. Like, I mean, how do you penalise these organisations or counties or nations, or do you give them a leg up? And clearly, I mean, the bottom line is financial in this as well. There's just over 3 million people in Georgia, and like you say, the capital of Georgia is Tbilisi, which not many people are going to be rushing out to go to.
Tbilisi looks like a fine city based on the people who went away there for the World Cup qualifier in September.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's just not going to happen. You say it won't happen in Conor O'Shea's time. It's not going to happen in the next 10-15 years.
Well, on O'Shea, is he spreading himself too thin? Has he got too big of a job in his hands to try and look after the development of the game in country and also try and coach the national team?
I don't know, possibly, but to be honest, I was in England when he took over Harlequin. You know, when he changed the culture in Harlequins and got them to that Premiership title. And he has, like, for an Irishman to be given the head of the Sports Institute, you know, the institute, that tells you the quality of man he is and the quality that he has in terms of development and creating that culture. So, you know, I think if anyone can do it, and I know he's Irish, so there might be a small bit of blind loyalty there, but he certainly can. I wonder who else would take something like that.
Yeah.
You know, unless you're given a 10-year program that you can feel, right, I can do what I want for 10 years. But he's taken this to, and he believes in it. You know, you watch that documentary that was on last year, like, he does his team talks in Italian and English, and he does his team reviews, and he's very critical of the guys, even though he knows they're not of the standard that they need to be. But he is honest. And you look at the whole thing last year with, you know, Rookgate and all that, and you look how he performed, and we'll speak about later on how he performed with the media after, and how honest he was about where they were going. And then you look at Eddie Jones going, well, that's not the game, and you're going, oh, hold on a second, it actually is there. Like, you haven't prepared your players to deal with an awareness or a circumstance that they can handle, where Conor O'Shea has educated his players that this is what we're going to do, lads, And he's just honest. He said after, we're not good enough. So we have to try and pull these rabbits out of the hat.
One note I want to touch on in terms of an Irish perspective, we saw Henshaw heading off with that arm in a sling, and it looks like it was a separated shoulder. Neil Francis today saying, once he got past in his piece the surgical metaphors and talking about Bloody Marys with no vodka,
which is probably the best line of it all.
He says Robbie Henshaw looks like he's out for the season. There's an art to scoring tries, and Henshaw, although he hasn't scored a huge amount of tries for Ireland, has scored some significant ones in his time for the Irish Green. The key to scoring is to not relax when you're touching down when somebody is chasing you. Tommaso Beneventui kept up the chase even though he had no realistic chance of stopping him. Henshaw relaxed as he dotted down, and Benvenuti jumped him in the act of scoring, and you could see the damage was done straight away. If you're not convinced, take back a bit and ask yourself how many players are injured while scoring. Like, talk about kicking a man when he's literally down.
I don't know. I think he's talking a small bit of...
Is there any truth in that?
No, Robbie goes to hand off. He's actually in a position where he feels your man's going to tackle him, so he tries to push him away. It happens by the impact of the guy on top of him and the impact on the ground. I certainly don't think he relaxed. He doesn't look like that, and he goes to hand him off. It happened Quinny in Argentina when Quinny will say, "Oh, he was saved Irish rugby by scoring that try." It's in the reach, it's in the contact zone that these things happen. I certainly don't think he relaxed. Look, I don't know, maybe I saw something else, but that's just my view on it.
Beyond not relaxing in scoring tries, where would Ireland need to improve based on what you can judge from yesterday's game for the visit of the Welsh? Because we're looking at two sides. I think across the two teams between yesterday's games, Wales and Ireland conceded a total of between 5 and 6 penalties across the two games, which is insanely disciplined, considering the opposition as well. It's very easy to take your mind off things even so slightly for Ireland against Italy and for Wales against England. I mean, that was a harem-scarum game from minute one.
I think those defensive lapses probably they just have the one in the French game, and then those giving Italy those opportunities yesterday. That's something that they have to, over the next 3 games, be as disciplined in that area as they are in their penalty count. But then you see the likes of Keith Earls and his tracking back and his work off the ball for that try saving tackle. You have guys like that are going to put that into scramble. Then I think it's going to be a different affair. I'm looking forward to that Wales game, to be honest, because Wales lose, they're out. Ireland win, and they keep what everyone wants alive. So I think it's just around those slip-offs and those knock-offs and concentration defensively. If they can shut them down, then I think they're going to be very, very hard to beat.
Brendan, you're looking forward to 2 weeks of Joe Schmidt turning the screw on Rhys Patchell, much as Eddie Jones has done over the past week or so?
Very, very unlikely, isn't it?
Well, that's if you get to speak to him at all.
Yeah, we will. This is obviously a wider issue that's kind of coming in through the relationship between sport and the media at the moment, but I think it's Peter O'Reilly just has a small little
it was mentioned in the lead up to yesterday's game that Schmidt wouldn't be conducting his regular post-match huddle with the written daily newspapers. After answering questions from all the media at the conclusion of the game, the Ireland coach traditionally then briefs the daily titles, giving quotes which are available from Monday's papers. However, yesterday's huddle was cancelled at short notice with no reason given. It's the first time that this has happened in Schmidt's 52 tests in charge. It's down to, according to O'Reilly, the coverage from one journalist of the Gerbrand Grobler case, and Grobler of course made his senior Munster bow last night as well. It seems odd that this is the reasoning for Schmidt to decide to close you guys off.
You see, I don't know for sure that is the reason. I'm a member of the Rugby Writers of Ireland, and I don't know for sure what exactly the reasoning that has been given.
Was an actual reason given yesterday?
I'm still confused by it, to be quite honest. I mean, this has been a big internal issue for the rugby writers all week, and we've said this off air, Richie. I mean, people listening to journalists giving out will it'll make people throw stones at their radios.
People are turning on Cry Me a River by Timberlake.
Exactly. But look, there is a wider issue on it. In terms of this, it's quite confusing. What I will say is the relationship between the Irish media, the Irish rugby media, and the IRFU and Joe Schmidt and his team is probably at an all-time low. Not just Joe Schmidt's team, but an Irish rugby team, and this is going back. We have members who were covering the Irish rugby team in the 1990s when we couldn't buy a win. So the relationship is at an all-time low. Access is being squeezed. We've lost access to a number of coaches, a number of players from what we had this time last year. And what we're seeing is, as we're seeing with a number of sports, is we're seeing a sports organisation that is putting ever more focus on their own media offerings, so their own media platforms, whether it's social media or their own, Irish Rugby TV in this instance or whatever. And the inference seems to be that they are now in competition with the media. And my point to that would be, I'm sorry guys, but you're an internal PR organisation. You're effectively Pravda and we're not. So there's going to be, I don't see how competition is the correct way of putting it. Now, if they were to come to us and say we see our offerings as complementary to yours, that's fine. That's, quite, to be honest about it, I quite like seeing Johnny Sexton or somebody give an interview and he's got a smile on his face and you get a different side to him, and that's great. But they're not in competition with us, but yet they hold the whip hand. They have access to all the people we need to speak to. So this is a wide-ranging issue. We saw it in the Premier League a number of years ago with Newcastle, Swindon Town, lots of different clubs, looking to some are even looking to charge media organisations to cover their press conferences. So it's a wider issue here. We no longer have football clubs, just like we no longer have actresses. We have perfume sales people, and everybody's branching out into everything and think they're experts on it. But you need that independent view, that independent voice to keep a well-rounded, discussion going. I mean, it's essential.
And it is something that there's obviously something about MTK Global and that side, but then there's also the soccer stuff between Martin O'Neill and Tony O'Donoghue, and I'm not a mad soccer fan. I jump on and jump off the bandwagon.
You're the bandwagon person that
100%. And but like, I see that from being an ex-professional sports person, I see that interview and I'm kind of go, I don't understand it. Like, Martin O'Neill is so experienced at what he does. He's been a head man for a long, long time. He was in Leicester and Celtic. The media over in England is ruthless. So God only knows what they, what they used to write about him, the players, all that kind of stuff. Where, to get so upset over someone saying, unlucky or hard luck, I don't even know what the phrase was. It was just, it just seems a bit. There just seems to be a small bit of kind of media, media bashing to a certain extent, but it kind of, there just seems to be a bit of closed doors towards certain things, and one bad report, one bad instant, and you kind of, that's it, you're done. And from a player's perspective, I can understand that, because sometimes you can say something in an interview, and I had it myself. I did an interview with David Kelly before, and I wasn't particularly playing that great. I was honest, and I said, I wasn't. Look, I don't think my form's great at the moment. I'm working on really hard on that. I go in and I speak. Tony McGann was I go in, I have my meetings with Tony, and they're pretty honest, and it was kind of reported then that that Tony and I were kind of at loggerheads, and we were having constant meetings about how he's performing and all that kind of stuff. And I read it, and I got a call from Tony, I got a call from Pat Gardy, God rest him, who was the media man, PR man at the time, and I just went to Pat on the phone and go, Pat, I'm not doing it anymore. I was like, I'm honest. I get it in the paper because I'm being honest, and then I get it from the manager because I'm being honest, and I'm like, do you know what? I'm not doing it. And I ended up not doing media then for about 18 months.
You're getting twice the amount of crap just because you're being honest.
Just because I'm sitting there and I'm just having a chat and just going, yeah, well, look, to be honest, I'm not playing that well, but I'm working really hard in the gym, working on my skills. I'm constant meetings with Tony about how to improve, what not to do, and you're just kind of going, oh. So from a player's perspective, I can understand that, but higher up, I'd be from, part of your job as far as I'm concerned. Am I wrong in thinking that?
Well, it's part of the deal. If you're a professional sports person now, dealing with the media is part of it. And we were talking earlier about brands. You are your own brand, and this is an opportunity for it as well.
Yeah. On the Schmidt thing, I'm interested to find out, because you said this is an ongoing thing, and it's probably getting to the worst point that it has done over the course of his tenure as Irish head coach. With the O'Neill and Tony O'Donoghue situation, it seems a one-on-one thing that seems to exacerbate everything around it, and you can almost pinpoint the genesis of it. The Schmidt, I'm finding it hard to get my head around why there's a mistrust of the media from Schmidt or why the relationship between him and the media have gotten that fractious?
Everybody know that Joe is a man who is all about control. And I think that's a large part of it. I mean, I've great respect for him as a coach. He's done brilliant stuff. But his fingerprints are on absolutely everything. And I think it extends to the dealings with the media.
Where does he see that he's ceded control?
The media is beyond his control. So, and this is just me surmising. I mean, he can't dictate what the media writes or whatever. And there's been stuff that he has been unhappy about, even stuff about Ireland's attacking game, which he's taken displeasure with in the past. Now, I'm not saying that's feeding into this, but there is a sense that this is clearly coming from Joe Schmidt, in my opinion, because he's the guy who dictates all that. He dictates everything that goes on around the team. So maybe it's something that he feels he can't control. I don't know. We'd have to ask Joe Schmidt about that. Maybe that's where it comes from. But what I find really interesting is, as well, you talked about the media in the UK. I mean, compared to the media in the UK, the Irish rugby team and the Irish football team, they get a very easy ride a lot of the time. I mean, and the really interesting thing is, I'm talking about media relations between rugby writers and the Irish Rugby Union being at an all-time low. This is at a time when the provinces are doing quite well, when the team is doing quite well, when the coverage is overwhelmingly positive of it. I mean, that's incredible to me.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily agree with the fact that they get an easy ride. Yeah, easier ride. Yeah, I do think that they, the media can at times. It's good, it's brilliant, it's fantastic, and then it's bad. Oh my God, it's really bad.
Is that down?
And that's rugby, soccer, everything. Like Martin O'Neill was the best in the world when we went away, got a 0-0 draw, came back, lost, and people are like, well is he the right man for the job?
Is that down to a bigger thing of the relationships between the Irish rugby and football sides and beyond, and the Irish public as a whole? Like, if the Irish soccer team does well, qualifies for World Cup, I mean, you've seen what the country turns into.
Oh yeah.
If the rugby team does well, again, you see what a decent portion of the country turns into.
Yeah.
Whereas with the English press, it's like they qualify for World Cup and they go, yeah, grand, go and win it now. It's not necessarily. The pressure is slightly different. The pressure is focused, I suppose, in a different way.
Yeah.
And I suppose, again, there's an element of you can control the media to a degree here, because you can control the message because the pool is smaller.
There's just it's kind of a wider thing as well. Just the manner in which media and sport kind of knock heads or interlink or whatever over the years. Like, gone are the days in every sport where you can ring up a player or whatever, and there's good and bad to that. I mean, the media has grown into this monster, when it was 3 papers and 1 radio station. So that's just not possible anymore. And I think just on a human level, that it's just natural that a distance has grown, and as things get more professional, people are kept at greater distance, and maybe this is the inevitable conclusion of it. And then you add in Facebook and Twitter and media platforms that are growing, and organisations want more control, there's more money involved, maybe this happens. And then when you do get somebody like Joe Schmidt who does like this control, that maybe this is just an inevitable spin-off on it. I'm not saying that's the way it should be, but there is a wider context, and you talk about MTK Global. And I mean, one thing for me as well, you talked about it as well, Johnny, with your experience of maybe not, I'm not doing an interview anymore, but the vast majority of these press conferences, they're a necessary evil. Journalists don't really like doing them. The players don't like doing them. The coaches don't like doing them. But it is the only regular.
Nobody says anything anyway.
But this is the thing. This is the thing. But it is
your only chance to get anything.
Exactly. Yeah. And it is a means of having some sort of minor human physical or contact with the people you're talking to. I don't know how. I'd be interested in your take on it. But even just knowing guys, being able to see guys, it does personalise things a little bit more. And I think that's a healthy thing.
Yeah.
Rather than just everybody being at a distance and shouting at each other from opposing trenches. I don't see how that does anybody any good. And all these players are coming in for these briefings with A4 sheets, having memorised, say this, say that, say the other.
Keep on to the message.
Yeah. And yet sometimes, you look, group interviews are a horrible thing at the best times, but sometimes really good stuff comes out of it. And one example would be Brian O'Driscoll, who has spoken since he retired about how he was always on message. He never saw it as a conversation like you maybe made the mistake or felt you made the mistake about. He was always on message. And yet, do you remember Brian O'Driscoll when Kidney was still coach?
Yeah.
He made a remark about maybe not knowing where the message was coming from. There was a confusion over the coaches.
Yeah.
So Brian O'Driscoll was able to do it. I remember one other instance before one of the Heineken Cup finals. Joe Schmidt was manager of Leinster at the time, and we just asked him, it was a routine question, Joe, Brian had some issue with a hamstring or whatever last week, just checking on that. He says, oh yeah, he got a surgical procedure. What? This was the week of
his knee.
His knee, was it?
Do
you know what I mean? So little gems do come out of it. I could, Owen Cadigan last year gave a great interview with Cork footballers, group interviews. They are worth it sometimes. You do get nuggets out of it. It does give you a window into what players and coaches are thinking, and it does help keep the players and coaches honest and on their toes. So it is an issue. It's a necessary evil, but it's one that has to be continued and I think protected.
But you gutter media spreading fake news, Brendan, that's what it's all about. Absolutely. We'll have more to come from the pay-per-view after the break. We'll be looking at the tributes to Liam Miller. Also more on GA expenses, do they ever go away? And Nathan Dyer's interview with Ollie Holt in the Mail on Sunday. It's all on the way.
Off the ball on News Talk. Down to business.
Winning Back the High Street is back on the road again, and on Saturday the 17th of February we roll into Dungarvan, where we're broadcasting from the moorings. I'll be talking to local businesses and some of the quirkier retailers. I'll be getting a sense of the business vibe in Waterford at large, and there'll be a few surprises as always. I'll be taking to the water, and there'll be live music from the day show. If you'd like to attend, simply go to newstalk.com/DTB Dungarvan. The event is free, but you do need a ticket. That's Winning Back the High Street, live from the moorings in Dungarvan on Saturday the 17th of February.
Down to business.
Sponsored by Flowgas.
Hope to see you there.
On News Talk.
Imagine this needle is your car, and this record is the road. When you turn the speed up just a little, you come up to hazards quicker. You have less time to react. If you hit a pedestrian at 50 kilometers per hour, there's a 50% chance they'll live. If you hit a pedestrian at 60 kilometers per hour,
there's a 10% chance they'll live.
If you're going too fast, you can't keep up with the road. Speed kills. So slow down. From the Road Safety Authority.
Find the perfect gift at the perfume shop this Valentine's. His and Hers 50ml Gucci Guilty Black are just €36. Plus get 20% off your second item. Love is in the air. Find the perfect partner for your Valentine in store or online at theperfumeshop.com. While stocks last, ends 14th of Feb.
Early Childhood Ireland's National Pyjama Day, Friday the 2nd of March, sees 60,000 children wear their pyjamas into preschool to support Irish children's charities. Get involved today by registering at earlychildhoodireland.ie. Join us to celebrate children helping children and having fun.
Hello, I'm Trina Horrigan, and I suffered from heel spurs and plantar fasciitis for years. Even after surgery, my feet were too sore to walk any distance. I went to Foot Solutions and they fitted me with customised arch supports and a great pair of runners. The results are unbelievable. Now I walk to work and can stay on my feet all day. The visit to Foot Solutions has made a huge difference to my life. I can't recommend them highly enough.
Visit Foot Solutions in Dublin, Cork, Waterford, Limerick, Galway and Newbridge, or visit footsolutions.ie.
You thought you'd need to shop around to get the best long-term savings on gas and electricity, but then you remembered you're with Electric Ireland and nearly 1 million other people who are getting the best savings on gas and electricity every year. So if you're not already with us, sign up online today. Search electricireland.ie. Because being with Electric Ireland is smart. Being with us and never switching again is smarter. Electric Ireland. That's smarter living.
Conditions apply. Direct debit and online billing. Credit terms for those not on an existing discount based on rates on the 11th of October 2017.
What are the 12 rules for life? In this week's Sunday Independent, meet the most controversial author in the world right now, Jordan Peterson, and learn to unleash your inner monster. And 40 ways to find love, Ireland's most romantic restaurants, and a free coffee for every reader at Costa. Plus, Niamh Horan at the Rugby rape trial. The Sunday Independent, the complete read.
True innovation is impossible to ignore. The Lexus IS is an executive saloon that demands attention. Now including our Lexus safety system with adaptive cruise control and complimentary satellite navigation. And you can avail of our hybrid trade-up allowance worth €2,000. Experience luxury hybrid with the Lexus IS from just €319 per month. Lexus. Experience amazing. Lending criteria, terms and conditions apply. Deposit required. This is a 3-year PCP agreement provided by Lexus Financial Services Ireland.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Yeah, you're very welcome back. It is the Sunday pay-per-view. Brendan O'Brien from The Examiner and Johnny Murphy here with me, Richie, until about 2 o'clock when we'll cross over to St James's Park for Newcastle against Manchester United. But we have to turn to the sad news that broke Friday night yesterday morning, the passing of Liam Miller at the age of just 36 from pancreatic cancer. Some lovely tributes, Brendan, in the papers today from Stephen Hunt in the Sunday Independent, from our own Kevin Kilban in the Mail on Sunday as well. But it's Paul Rowan's that kind of stuck out. There was a brilliant sliding doors moment contained within Rowan's that I didn't realise until reading this one about his move from Celtic to Manchester United, saying that making the breakthrough under O'Neill at Celtic was a slow process, hampered to some degree by injuries, but it came in the autumn of 2003 when Miller scored and starred in Champions League games against Lyon and then Anderlecht. Alex Ferguson was in the stands to run the rule over Vincent Kompany as well. But it was Miller time. 56,000 fans rising to acclaim the midfielder as he hobbled off with 15 minutes remaining. You think about that could have been the signing of Vincent Kompany for Manchester United instead of Manchester City, and it could have been Liam Miller sticking around Celtic for another 18 months.
Exactly.
It's just one of those really, really strange career-defining moments, but it shows how much he stuck out, that he impressed a manager of Ferguson's calibre with those performances at that level as well.
Yeah, and I think because it is quite a while ago now. I mean, since he made the breakthrough, and we after United, his career was a kind of he was going back down the ladder to a certain extent, and people.
There only ever is back down the ladder.
Well, exactly, but I think it was maybe more elongated. Maybe he didn't stay up at that top level as much as maybe he could have had he stayed at Celtic or whatever. But and that's been, even before the sad news of the weekend when Liam Miller's name passed up, just purely in footballing context, which of course is highly irrelevant this weekend. But it's a pity he didn't do this and that. And I think what's lovely about Paul's piece and a lot of the pieces this weekend is to highlight just what a career he did have. And it's been said already, he got to play for Glasgow Celtic and Manchester United, and for a kid growing up in the 80s or 90s in Ireland, I mean that, and play for his country and his local club. But what struck me actually just in and around the part you read, Richie, was what you have to do just to survive in the UK. He went over as a 15-year-old. I mean, how many countless thousands of kids have made that journey and come back? He went over there, as Paul says, he had to survive homesickness to make his debut for Glasgow in 2000. And then what people forget, it's always the overnight sensation, whatever sport. But as Paul puts it here, he was hampered to some degree by injuries and even making the breakthrough. So he had to survive all those odds, get over all those odds just to get that far. And
you find the resilience involved in that.
Exactly. Because when a youth player gets that tag of being injury prone, that can affect you way more than when you're an older player. I mean, there's a lot of credit in the bank in terms of your past performances for a senior team, but when you're a young player, you're like, will I give a chance on this lad to give the breakthrough at senior level if he's injury prone at that, And
it shows his mental fortitude to stick through those injuries that he had then at that critical time, that he was like, no, this is for me, I'm going to push through that. Just shows the resilience that he did have, the mental strength is to push through that at that time is
and there's good stuff as well from Paul about how he would have met him in Middlesbrough in December 2008 when his career was struggling, and Miller was very upfront about maybe the picture that was painted of him because of some things that were said by Roy Keane about his timekeeping and everything while he was at Sunderland, and how Miller felt that maybe that overshadowed him, it followed him around.
It's crazy how interlinked their two careers are, him and Keane. When you think of, he came through at Celtic and as a Cork man, so everybody, and goes to Manchester United, so everybody goes, new Roy Keane. Keane's downfall at United is a result of partially name-checking Miller on an MUTV interview, and then he goes and signs him for Sunderland. After, on the back of all that, which is a great act of, let's put the past behind us. And then after that, ends up kind of sticking the boot into him a couple of times in terms of discipline and all that. It's crazy given the fact that they're both Cork men, how interwoven their careers are. But ultimately the greatest tragedy in all this, I mentioned like the football community is one thing, but the 3 kids and his wife Claire who are obviously left heartbroken by all of this, and David Snade mentions it in his piece in the Mail as well. The greatest joy that he seemed to have, it's weird to talk about somebody who is only 36 about being in their latter years, was the joy he had from watching his kids play football, and now that's sadly no more for Miller. It's just a desperately tragic loss, and I wish all his best to his family and his former teammates and his friends and everything. Very, very sad story. Elsewhere, Johnny, I know this one kind of caught your eye in the Times as well, and it might have slipped under the radar a little bit for a lot of people, the move for racing to being behind another paywall and being with Racing UK?
Yeah, I think it's been touched on a few times throughout the week, but it's a weird one for me because there's a lot of people, and some stats in this are kind of incredible, really. Like 30,000 people a week in Ireland will watch at the races for 15 minutes each day.
That's incredible dedication.
So like that, and that's like, and we were speaking off air. That for me is, I'm one of those 30,000 people. But I'll often record race meetings, come in then at night and watch and just rattle through the races and watch them. My wife goes out to me all the time.
That is dedication.
Yeah, but
that's the first person I've ever heard that's recording races of the races.
It's not because I'm a punter or anything. I'm genuinely interested. For my sins, have set up and I run a few syndicates. One in Joseph O'Brien's, one in Kevin Prendergast. But so I watch the form. But like we were talking outside, it's going to cost €31 per month. I already have BT Sport because I have to. I'm involved in rugby. That's something I need to keep up with kind of current trends and that. Am I going to get I don't know. It's one, and for me, of those 30,000 people, I'd say they'd be looking at me going, he's a definite, he's going to sign up. I don't know whether I am or not. Look, I probably will, but I'm still, it's in my mind. The whole thing is that it's all based around SIS, Satellite Information Services, and I think Johnny Ward, has been on previously and he spoke about this. They're responsible for the betting shops. So every time a race course opens their doors, they get under the new deal, it's $8,500 a race. So if there's a 6 race card, it's $51,000. They get that. And that's a significant jump to what the current deal is. I think it's anywhere between 30 to 45k is what they would get. Now, I was at Ferryhouse on Wednesday and there was maybe 100 people there, and that's being generous. But the race course got maybe $40,000 for opening its doors. And of those 100 people, I would say 50% of them are owners and trainers. So they're generally going to have to be there. In terms of people who are there just watching, I'd say it's not even 30-40%. And those people are at home. It was a rough enough day. They're at home. If you've an interest, you're watching it at the races because it's on free to view package on Sky and Virgin. So it's just one of those ones, I think, that the industry, and I know it's one that it probably has a bad rep because it's viewed as kind of elitist to a way, but HRI are going through this big thing, trying to get new people into races, race goers, new owners. There's a massive push for syndicates and racing clubs. Now the syndicates and racing clubs could be at a cost of 50 quid a year to 50 grand a share. So like they're trying to cover everyone. And for me, something like this really is going to affect it. Like Eddie O'Leary, I know the O'Learys aren't, they don't particularly hold back in what they want to say, but who owns Racing OK are responsible for buying the rights and taking this away. Who owns Racing UK? The British racecourses. They'll do a super job. They're going to do a super job at helping racing, won't they? Irish racing, won't they? Now, maybe that's a bit harsh, but that is kind of reality. But we were talking also, it's also kind of dangerous line because, €31 per month, people who aren't punters, you might have a couple of fivers each way here or whatever, but all you're doing in this new deal is you're pushing those people to the betting shops.
That's ultimately the goal though, isn't it?
Yeah, but is
for the company who are looking after Racing UK
that's a dangerous game to play down.
Well, it's also one that's reared its head to a degree in League of Ireland football, in that it made itself, it's like League of Ireland football signed it with Track Champ was the deal they signed, whereby basically they were doing online streaming of every single game outside of Ireland, it must be noted. But if you were signed up to a certain betting company, you were then able to view the games online, and ultimately it was for the benefit of people who are betting on them. So what they're looking to do here is get people back into the betting shops notionally and spend more money at the betting shops, while the betting shops are also funding the TV deal that's passing money onto the track. And you're going to have a sport that nobody is really actually watching, but people are just throwing money at, which is a bizarre scenario. But there's another there's a bigger point to that as well, which is people would have flicked by at the races, and at the races it's just on. The flicking by of a channel and coming across a sport is going to become a less and less likely event for people who don't have 35 quid spent on TV. We've seen it with cricket in England, how the game has suffered over there because it's become less viewable to people who might just have terrestrial or Freeview TV. It's happening with football to a degree. We're now going to see the further fracturing of the Premier League TV rights deal come next week or the week after.
It's going to happen with rugby.
And it's going to happen with rugby as well. The Pro 14, that deal is going to change and alter from next season too. You just wonder what the long-term effect of all this is going to be. Like, speaking as a former child, I believe you two might have been as well at some point. You see something on TV, and for better or worse, you kind of want to copy it. So you see a footballer on TV. I remember growing up watching Division 1 football in England, and you kind of want to go out on the road and play it. You see the World Cup, and you want to go out and play it. You see tennis during the summer at Wimbledon or the French Open, and everyone has tennis rackets, and there's a bit of rope across between two trees. That thing is going to be lost because there's nowhere to come across it.
Yeah, like you see Derek O'Connor, who's an amateur, riding a Group 1 winner last week for Joseph, and the kids, he's an amateur because he probably weight and all that kind of stuff, but like exact same young kids, if you're in Pony Club or whatever, you're going to be watching that for free. You're going, oh my god, an amateur just won a Grade 1 race, I'm going to do that someday. And it's the same for lads watching Keith Earls chasing the ball down like yesterday. There's one kid in Moy Ross watching this going, I'm going to do that someday. And I think that's something that sport, there should be no boundaries to dreams in sport in terms of, and what you say is right, Richie, that there's going to be boundaries because our kids aren't going to be able to watch the sport that we all grew up watching purely because some families aren't going to be able to afford it. That's just the reality of where we're headed, and that creates issues in itself. More people go to the betting shops. If you want to go watch a race and you've got your kids with you, you're going to go to a betting shop, you're going to bring them with you. If you want to watch a match, you have to go to a pub, so on. It creates all sorts of
you mentioned
issues.
You mentioned the word elitist in terms of racing, but ultimately that's what we're going to have with each sport, in that if you want to be, or if the further behind paywalling happens with sport, you're going to have people who are only going to rugby schools or in rugby families are going to continue on being rugby people. So you're going to have people who are connected to people within football clubs going on and being better footballers. Similarly, if somebody wants to get involved in racing, they're going to have to go through regular racing channel. Like it makes things less egalitarian. And ultimately that's a huge problem going forward for all sports.
And I think you mentioned the cricket one, and that's probably a very good one to look at in detail, because I think it was after the Ashes in 2005 that Channel 4 lost the rights to Sky. So they've had a good 12-13 years at it, and just I know from reading stuff down the years about it that there's all sorts of kind of head scratching about how you do this. And other sports have looked at it as well. Do we get to a stage now where we have a certain amount of you have a TV deal where yes, it's behind a paywall, but maybe one game a weekend or whatever is on live on terrestrial TV, and maybe stuff like that needs to be done. It's probably a band-aid on the problem as well, because I mean, like if you're a follower, like you say, of Premier League football now, if they show Watford and Southampton, is that really going to take you out onto the streets with your plastic football? But look, it will evolve. Who knows where it'll evolve in the future. Maybe
it would. I mean, if you look at it like from a sheer numbers point of view, when you see an FA Cup game that's shown on BBC, BBC One, like it could well be Notts County against Swansea from the other week. That'll get far more viewers, and I'd imagine, I don't have the figures to hand, but the FA Cup figures versus what Sky will get for the Premier League, just the FA Cup far outweighs what Premier League does by dint of the fact that it's on BBC. So you could see somebody who's watched Tammy Abrams score twice in an 8-1 victory for Swansea against Notts County and go, do you know what, I can't fancy a game of football, or fancy going out and
it comes back to it as well. Like, I mean, we think of the FA Cup as an example, and you think of West Brom playing a B team and playing in front of 15,000 at the Hawthorns, but then you look at Yeovil live a couple of weeks ago, and you do see the kids behind the goal, and their faces are jammed up against the back of the net, and that's what it is. And it comes back to the racing thing as well. If you're not there and you're not smelling the grass, are you going to be tempted into it?
And I think cricket is a big thing. Like I moved over to England that summer in 2005 when obviously it was crazy. The whole England went mental, and it was all on terrestrial TV. I know it was the first time they won it in, I don't know, God, how many years.
I watched the whole thing.
But like after that, they went on a run of winning the Ashes and really competitive. But there wasn't England at the same time. there wasn't as big because people just weren't able to see it.
Well, you come back to a media thing. When you're on Terrestrial and they had that proliferation of the England team at that stage, regular Joe Soap in the street could probably name about 5 players from that England team. Like, you're probably talking about people who don't have an interest in cricket. They could probably go, Freddie Flintoff, Kevin Peterson. And
they all became stars.
They all became stars. Yeah. You go to a Joe Soap on the street now, name 5 England cricket players. They'll look at you cockeyed. Like, there's no chance that they'll be able to do it. They might name one. They might have a Joe Root in there, whatever, but it's not going to happen now.
Won't even know Owen Morgan's Irish. You know what I mean? Like, stuff like that. You know, like, you just...
It's a fine English name. What are you talking about?
Whole different ball game.
Come here. There's probably stuff that we could get to as well. The Kieran Dyer piece as well is well worth reading. An interview with him with Ollie Holtz touches on his abuse as a child, which we won't have time to get to this afternoon as well. Other stuff knocking around the papers as well today. Colin O'Rourke talking about GA expenses and Michael Dignan singing from the same hymn sheet as well.
Interesting one.
It's an interesting one that we're going to have this story over and over again until everybody kind of goes, is it an amateur game or isn't it?
There is one thing that we spoke about outside, and there's one line that I take a small bit of kind of umbrage with. It is not fair to, or even accurate, to paint everyone in the same colour, but the country is full of bluffers following county teams. Now, there was a match on in Newbridge yesterday. Now, St. Connor's Park hasn't changed. When I retired, I went back and I started playing with Ellistown, my local club, and we had a game in Newbridge in the championship, and I was called into the Irish the Kildare under-20s. St. Connor's hasn't changed. They still have the same holes in the wall for the last 20, 30 years. Like, they haven't even been painted over. But last Sunday, they played Monaghan, and it was a great game. It was jammed. So I had big umbrage with that. I was like, I'm not too sure about that. And you actually covered it.
Yeah, I was there,
Yeah, like, and there's stuff like that littered throughout the whole thing that you're kind of going, I don't know if you're up to date with kind of inter-county or even club stuff.
There's a line from there's a line from Conor O'Rourke and that one about nutritionists, about how X amount of thousands were spent on nutritionists, of course, and he's like, I haven't seen that many underfed GA players.
Yeah,
well, that's not what nutrition is.
No, and there's stuff that you're just kind of going, hold on a second, you know, how, like, there are some drastic things in terms of, you know, what it costs to 150 or 15 grand per week to run Roscommon, you know, and then obviously Dublin and so 1.6 million on their teams. But just some of the stuff in that, I'm not too sure how balanced an article it is. There is some stuff that is definitely, you know, needs to be addressed. And I think we spoke about it already, kind of, we don't want to create a kind of elitist that there's a top 4, top 5 and it's consistently through, and he's probably trying to address that in some way, but I don't know, I think it's quite a biased article, but it is a good read, it is an interesting read.
But you've got counties in an amateur game operating as independent businesses. Those two things can't really go together. If it's an amateur game and you're operating as an independent business.
Yeah, and you've got volunteers and professional staff.
The whole thing is that can't last forever.
It can't last. It's again, it's a sticking plaster.
But my argument to that would be, is every club not performing at its highest level when it is actually run like a business, even though it's a voluntary organisation, because you have to make ends meet and you have to try and make sure that the idea of a club is that you hit zero every year, that you don't go into the red. Yeah, so every amateur sporting organisation, in my opinion, does need to be run like a business, because that's when if it's not, then it does fall into, that's when it can really fall into issues, financial issues.
But it's not a level playing field, and you're not going to have the people who are more capable of bringing in the bigger money wanting to level that playing field.
Yeah, but
because it's not a
but it's layered then in terms of, you know, there's junior C clubs that, you know, they know their level is to get to junior A. There's intermediate that their goal is to get to senior. It's like everything, it's layered in terms of the junior C club. They're not going to try and take on, you know, like, you know, my local town, you know, Ellistown, they're not going to try and take on Sarsfields because they don't have the catchment area, they don't have the funds, but the right people need to be in the right place to run the youths, the minis, the, you know, senior team, the minors, the 20s, and then you have the chairman who's responsible for making sure, and the treasurer, ends must meet. Otherwise, the local area or the local town are going to miss out on, like the TV, they're going to miss out on a sport that is not good for our kids. So I think that would be my view on it. Maybe I'm wrong because I have a professional sports side. But that would be my view, that it needs to be run voluntary, but very similar to business.
Yeah, it's a tough one to try and balance out, and I don't think it's the last of that conversation we'll be having. But unfortunately, that is it for today's newspaper producer, Brendan O'Brien, senior sports journalist with the Irish Examiner, and Johnny Murphy. Thank you so much for coming into the studio. We'll be back with the build up to Newcastle versus Manchester United next.